All right, welcome to the training today. It is on how to submit an offer or how to fill out your contract rather directly from Netris Matrix, the MLS provider for us. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. And I wanna take you here first. When you log into Netris Matrix, this is where you'll be logged into, kind of your home screen, let's say. Down here on the left-hand side is the transaction desk or Instanet that we are going to be focusing on today. This is the MLS. So let's go here because I want to show y'all how to write up a contract directly from Matrix, not go in here initially and then have to input everything manually. We want to get as much in there automatically. That way we're spending less time writing up paperwork. So click on Netris Matrix. It'll take you to your home screen, which is here. Let's go quick search. We're going to type in a property that I know is on the market, just for example, 5819 London. It's in Dallas. Click results. Down here it says one search. So we click results. Now there's some tabs here that you can click on so you can go directly to transaction desk. Which is Instanet, which is the same thing. This is where our contracts are housed. So you can click directly from here. Generally, I don't know why, but I just click through here. I like to see the picture just to make sure that I am working on the correct home. Last thing you want to do is be busy. You click on the icon from the listing, from the one-line listing, and all of a sudden you don't realize that you're in the wrong property. So it auto-populates the wrong information. So you don't want that. So when you get here, what you'll do is right below the picture, there's some links. Okay, this is history, documents, transaction desk. This is where this is the link that we want to click in order to get to our paperwork, our contracts. It will load here. So you'll be met with a pop-up box. All right, it'll already have the address in there. If you have a template, meaning like I've got a listing template, which has the paperwork that I will need, the contracts that I will need for a listing, or I have 1 to 4 offer. So that's the buyer's side. And then this was just a test one that I made. We're going to skip that for now because I want to show you where to get the contracts. And then we'll do another video on how to set up a template. But for right now, 1 to 4 offer, we're not going to click. We're just going to leave this blank. Type, you do want to put this, if you're on the buyer's side, then you will put residential sale, okay? Obviously not residential listing or residential lease. You'll do residential sale, unless you are doing a condo, okay? If you're doing a condo, then you'll click one of these, all right? But for a standard single family home, boom, residential sale, this is it right here. As you see, we imported the data from Netris. This is the MLS number. I'm listed as a selling agent. You've got the listing agent, the selling agent, neither or both, okay? When you're the buyer, it sounds a little different or odd to say selling agent, but when you're the buyer's agent, you are the selling agent. The listing agent is the one that has the listing, okay? So when you're representing the buyer, you're the selling agent for this use here. I do not use the wizard. There are some people that use the wizard, but I find it just a little bit easier to fill out the contract on the contract versus just the blanks. Now, that said, it might be a little bit more unorthodox and you might prefer to use the wizard, but that's for you to decide. We can do another video on that as well later, but I prefer seeing the contract. That way I know I'm filling it out correctly. So I'm just going to hit create. All right, it's going to take you to this page here where it's going to have some information about the property. It will also be the picture here, so you see that. So that's perfect. You know that you're writing it up for the correct contract. I go immediately over to dashboard where it says forms. This is where you want to click the plus sign. Your standard contract that you're going to work on is the 1 to 4. So if you type in 1 to 4, you can hit add. A lot of times there's 2 of them, a TREC and then a Texas real estate. I normally always gravitate towards the TREC contract. So that's the one I generally use. So just click that little check box. You can see up here in the basket, that you have one document there. I also fill in or look for the third party financing addendum. Boom, right there. Again, TREC document, just for consistency. I use that. And then, you know, this house doesn't need it, but let's say you need the lead-based paint addendum. So you will go addendum for seller's disclosure of information on lead-based paint and lead-based paint hazards. Boom. Or this one right here. Sorry, this will be the TREC version. You can see the TREC, like Texas Real Estate Commission or Texas Realtors. Again, I just normally use the TREC contract versus Texas Realtors. Doesn't really matter though. All right, so you can see now I've got 3 documents there. And let's say that we are buying, and this is kind of a, oh, let's do this. Let's do a, this is more relevant right now. And I hope I know the name. Let's see, appraisal, let's see, waiver. I'm looking for the appraisal waiver form. Let's see, I'm not sure of the exact. Oh, here we go. Yeah, addendum concerning right to terminate due to lender's appraisal. Because this is more current, let's go ahead and throw this one in there so we know how to fill it out as well. All right, so this is on there. We've got 4 documents. Boom, we're going to add these. These are all documents that you're going to fill out from the buyer side. The lead-based paint one, we're going to talk about that because it really needs to be from the seller side, but I feel comfortable filling it out from a buyer standpoint. We'll just have to get the seller to sign it and fill out a couple things. All right, so the 1 to 4 family contract right here. Let's go ahead and start with that. All right, so a lot of times you will have just this here where it says C agent. The parties to this contract are, and this is the seller in the top line, and then the buyer on the next 2 lines. A lot of times for whatever reason, the agents don't want to give the seller's name out, even though all we have to do is, as I'll show you, is go to that listing and we can find them. But nonetheless, a lot of times C agent will be populated here. That's because the listing agent put that in the name for the seller. All right, but what we do, we go over here to our MLS, and this is how I find it pretty easy. You click on the address, pop-up will appear, and then you just go click on the property, and it'll be Rebecca Wren. Now, I know that this is actually not the seller, so this is actually a good little practice here. I know that they flipped this house, and they bought the house less than 30 days ago. I believe it was in the middle of March, middle to later March, or middle to end of March. So I know this is actually not the buyer here, or not the seller. But for this aspect, we'll use her name. But on this one, I actually would contact the agent. So if you know that they're flipping the property and they've sold it within the last 30 or 60 days, you might want to check with the listing agent before you write it up with this person's name to make sure that you're writing it up correctly. But just because I know that that's not the owner. But for this instance, we'll use that as the owner. We'll paste her name there. We'll say that I'm the one buying the property, John Jacobus, and then my wife as well, Angela Jacobus. Already, it has it auto-populated, the lot block, so the legal description here, Dallas, City of Dallas, Collin County, and then also known as, and then it gives the address that we would use generally. All right, so now we're going to go through and fill out the rest of the contract, okay? Exclusions. This is where a lot of times they'll have them listed in the listing, but if they are listed in the exclusions for the listing, they will auto-populate here. This one does not have any, so there's none here. Now, say that you get some information from the listing agent that they want to keep a chandelier, or they want to keep, I had somebody one time want to keep like a banister. And so we put that in the exclusions. That's where this would go. So for instance, let's just type in one that's very common is mounted TV in living room 1. Okay, so the mounted TV in living room 1 would now be excluded from the deal. All right, let's just say here, so the list price is $725. And so we will type in here, oh, sorry. Let me reshare my screen. Okay. So list price here is 725. So we're, as soon as that goes up, we will fill out the contract. So we're going to offer list price. So let's just say 725. Oops, 725. Well, I don't know why it's doing that, but what we're going to put $100,000 down. Okay, so for round number's sake, $100,000 down. That means we're financing $625,000. And boom, there you go. Now it's $725,000. So you have the down payment plus the finance amount should equal the offer that you're making. We want to make sure, because they are obtaining financing on this, that we make this contingent upon the third-party financing addendum, which is right here. This right here is the loan assumption and then seller financing. Very rarely does that happen, but if you do have somebody that is assuming a loan, which is again very rare, then that's where you use that. And then the seller financing addendum, that's something that a lot of investors use, but not a lot of retail buyers have those. These right here, these leases, this is something that was new, that was added. So the property is subject to one or more residential leases, and addendum regarding the leases is attached to the contract. So maybe the home is being rented out currently, so they have that. So if the home is being rented out, they would check this box and then attach the lease to the contract. But this one's not. And so we won't need that. Fixture lease, something along the lines of solar panels that you might see, propane tanks, water softener that is being leased that's at the home. You would check that box there. And then natural resources. And so like that's oil and gas and mineral rights to the property if they have like a mineral right lease on it. Then you would just check these boxes if that applies. So let's say you have a residential lease, boom, you check that box, you attach it, that applies to the contract now. Or let's say the seller has delivered to buyer a copy of all natural resource leases. Boom. So you have C checked, and then those have been delivered. All right. If they have not been delivered, then you would check box 2. Seller has not delivered to buyer a copy of the natural resource leases. And so you would check that one, and then you would fill in, oh, that needs to be delivered within 7 days or so, however many days you want to put there. But something that's not too far in the future, but not immediate as well. It will depend on how easy that might or might not be able to be attained. All right. So this is section 5, earnest money and termination option. Okay. So whenever you execute a contract, obviously you will need to deliver earnest money and option fee. Again, this is a change beginning in April as well. And so right here, it says delivery of earnest money and option fee within 3 days after the effective date. Buyer must deliver to. You are going to put the escrow agent's name in here. Okay. So let's just say John Doe is the escrow officer. So John Doe is the escrow officer. And then you are going to put the address of the escrow officer. Let's just say 1125 National, I'm just making this up, Parkway. Okay, and that is in Dallas, Texas, 75252. Okay, and then you are going to put the amount of earnest money here. So $7,250 would be the standard option or earnest money. Now, keep in mind, with this market that we're in right now, April 19, 2021, things are a little bit different than they were before. Things are very, very competitive. And so you might change that a little bit. You might increase that. But for right now, just speaking in general terms, generally it's 1% of the purchase price. So 7,250 is what we would put there. So we're good as earnest money and as blank as option fee. So option fee, a lot of times, is generally 1/100th of that. So you might be looking at $725 for the option fee. Some people try and get that as low as possible because you don't want to spend that money in case you end up backing out. But I would say this is where you can differentiate yourself in this. You really want to pass along that you are serious about buying the property. And so maybe you put $1,000 in here or $2,000 even if you're very, very sure that your client's going to buy the property. Now, just as a side note to this, and this is would be something that we would cover somewhere else. But just so you know, if you go under contract, you execute this contract and then you back out during your option period, this money will be lost. Okay. You would get the earnest money back, but the option fee you would lose. All right. So let's just say 7,000 or excuse me, $725. Okay. For the option fee. All right. Now this right here, very rarely used, but if you would like to deliver earnest money, extra earnest money after the option period, this is where you put that, and it would be needed to be at the escrow agent within so many days of the contract. Okay. Termination option. This is where you put in your option fee, the amount, or option period, the amount of days. Right here, general standard option period is 7 days. Again, in the current market we're in, we want to try and shrink that as much as possible. That way our offer is competitive, but I would really love to have a 7-day option period. That way we have time and we don't feel rushed. So standard 7 days, although that is being squeezed down to 5 days or 4 days. And in some cases, none. So, which is tough. But if your buyer has the ability to have a quick inspection and knows they want the house, then that is a place that you can differentiate yourself as well. Title policy and title survey. So this is where seller shall furnish to buyer at seller's or buyer's expense an owner's title policy or owner policy of title insurance issued by. So majority of the time, this is the seller paying this. Again, in this market, sometimes the buyers are picking up the tab, but then you put the name of the title company in here, as it says, title company. So let's just put Fidelity National Title, because that's who I use most now, National Title. Put them in that space there, and then we can move on. Okay, the standard printed exception as to discrepancies, conflicts, shortages, or in area or boundary lines, encroachments, or protrusions or overlapping improvements will not be amended or deleted from the title policy, or will be amended to read shortages in area at the expense of buyer or seller. So this is something where it's 50-50. A lot of times we say will not be amended. It is what it is. What's there is there. Other times those shortages are amended. And so then you choose buyer or seller. Majority of the time, if I'm representing the buyer, I try and put seller. But again, in this market, it's something where I try not to put as much on the seller as possible. So a lot of times I just say I will not, it will not be amended or deleted from the title policy. Okay. But that's something that can be discussed later. All right. So the survey must be delivered by the seller, but let's say they haven't done that yet. So they say within, I normally put 3 days after the effective date of the contract, seller shall furnish to buyer and title company seller's existing survey of the property. Okay. If now this bold sentence is important, if seller fails to furnish the existing survey or affidavit within a time prescribed, buyer shall obtain a new survey at seller's expense no later than 3 days prior to closing date. Okay, very important. If you have a buyer, that's perfect because then you'll get a new survey at the seller's expense. But if they do get a survey to the title company and it's not acceptable to the title company, the buyer shall obtain a new survey at seller or buyer's expense. A lot of times, especially now, buyers are paying this, even though it used to be more so seller, but now buyers are paying this a lot. These next two are basically just stating that at the buyer's or seller's expense, they will be providing a new survey. Right here is how many days you have to object to that. I normally just put 3, sometimes put 5, but normally put 3. These check boxes right here, the property is or is not subject to mandatory membership in a property homeowners association. If it's in a homeowners association, which this one is not, then you check is not subject to. If it is, then you click is. All right, let's scroll down through here. I'm just going to hit the highlights where we are filling stuff in. You need to read through the contract. You need to be very familiar with it. But for this video, I don't want to read through the entire contract. I just want to show you guys where you are going to be filling in items. Okay. The seller's disclosure. The seller in most cases is required to give you a seller's disclosure, which gives you a little bit more in-depth information on the property. So right here, if they have given this to you, which a lot of times they upload it into the MLS, if they have given this to you, you'll check buyer has received notice. If they have not, you will check buyer has not received notice within so many days. Normally I put 3 days there. After the effective date of the contract, seller shall deliver the notice to buyer. Okay. Then the third option is the seller is not required to furnish the notice under Texas property code. That could be for like a foreclosure or something like that, where they don't know the condition of the property. At least they don't know the condition of the property. All right. Now here's one where I get a lot of questions from my clients. I'm going to say always, 95% of the time, I check the box buyer accepts the property as is. Okay. And they think, whoa, I'm not accepting the property as is, because maybe we know that there's something that we're going to ask for, or maybe they're saying, well, I'm not accepting it as is. I still want an inspection, and I'm going to negotiate some of those repairs. What that means right now, or what that means is that you accept the property in its current condition right now. As it sits right now, I accept the property as is. Now, once we have the inspection, that'll be a different story. We'll try and negotiate some of those items, some of those repairs. But I always check property accepts, or buyer accepts property as is. The problem with checking this box is then you're noting to the lender, if you do have a lender on the deal, that there's a problem that you want fixed. And then they're more inclined to flag it and make sure that that repair is completed before they will finish the transaction. Okay, so buyer accepts the property as is 95% of the time. Residential service contract, that's a home warranty. Going rate for those right now is about $650, $700. Now, again, they're not in the majority of the contracts right now, just because that's one of the items that people are leaving out to be more competitive. So if I'm writing up a contract on a house that has multiple offers, 0% chance that I'm putting this in here. If my clients want a home warranty, I'll definitely recommend the company, but this is going to be left blank because we don't want to take $700 off the seller's profit right here. So I would put 650 or 700 if I am negotiating that. If I'm not, then I would just leave it blank. Okay. Brokers or sales agents, if they're any more than 10% owner in the sellers in the selling of the home, then they have to label it here. So they would just write that in. Close date, normally I pick something 30 days unless I've been instructed by the lender that I can do something quicker. So as it sits, it's April 19th. So I would just put, May 19th. All right. Very important here. Number 10 or section 10, possession of the property. Are you going to take possession upon closing and funding, or a lease back? If it's upon closing and funding, boom, right there. If it's a lease back, right here. I'm actually going to pull a seller or buyer's temporary lease back, seller's temporary lease back. So that way we can go through it. But this is because I think that happens a lot right now. So let's go through that as well. But we're making this according to a temporary lease, temporary residential lease form. All right. Special provisions. Read this very carefully. Insert only factual statements and business details applicable to the sale. TREC rules prohibit license holders from adding factual statements or business details for which a contract addendum or lease or other form has been promulgated by TREC for mandatory use. Meaning, if there's a contract for it or addendum for it, don't put it in special provisions. Use the other form that is provided to you for that specific reason. All right. Now, seller paid closing costs. This very rarely happens anymore, at least initially. Sometimes it does, but it's rare. If you were to ask the seller to pay for closing costs, meaning you're going to pay $100,000 for the house, but you want them to pay $2,000 in closing costs. Well, if you wanted them to do that, this is where you would put it. I'm not going to do that here because that's a rarity. And so that's not something that we would ask for right now. We might ask for it in lieu of repairs. We do that, but this is something that initially I'm not asking for. This is for notices that will be either mailed to you or given to you by the title company, or if they need your contact information for anything, this is where you put that. So we can just put John Jacobus. Oh, sorry, this is my address. So we'll just put 11111 Main Street, Dallas, Texas 75252. So this is literally like, this would be the buyer's home address. Okay. Then you put the phone number 972-555-5555. Okay. Then my email, John at the Gingrich Realty.com. Okay. And then you can put the email address for your spouse or for the other person buying the property. Section 22. This is where you put everything that you will have with the offer. So meaning if you are using a third-party financing addendum, boom, you're going to check that. All right. Addendum for mandatory or property subject to mandatory membership in a property homeowners association. Boom, you would check that. We're not doing that right now, so we're not going to, but that's a very common one that's checked. Buyer's temporary lease. No, we're going to do sellers. So seller's temporary lease there, but these right here, no, we're not selling another property. No oil and gas. We are not a backup, although that is something that we could talk about later. So not any of these items, not a short sale. We're not a C-word. We are lead-based paint. And so we'll have that. We're really not, because it's not built, but for this example, we did have a lead-based paint addendum. To have that required, the property needs to be built. I don't know if it's on or before or just before, but just to make sure anything built in 1978 or before, I have a lead-based paint addendum signed. And then all these other items, they're not there. If you have an attorney, which in my 14 years of doing this, we never have, but if you have an attorney or your buyer has an attorney, this is where you put the information. It's more common in other states. So here we go. So this is, you don't fill out anything there. This is when the contract is executed. You will put that date. Executed means both the seller and the buyer sign the property or sign the contract. Once that happens, you will put that date there. This, for whatever reason, the names don't come down always. So we put in the buyer and the seller's names up there. Let me see if I have that pasted. So yeah, so Rebecca Wren, boom, put it there. John Jacobus, Angela Jacobus, boom. This is where you will put your information, and the buyer's or the seller's agent information should be set up right here. You'll put your license number, your address to the office, email. So there you go. You got my email and my phone number there, even though I tried to hide it a little bit. But 058-1494 is my license. And let me check here, the business one real quick. Search license. Just for instance, if you need somebody's license number, you can go to TREC, search for them, and you can grab that. So I just grabbed the employee, or excuse me, the LLC license number. So on this side, if you're representing only the buyer, boom, buyer only as buyer's agent, and then seller only as seller's agent. This is where you would put the license number for the listing agent. So you go over here. This is where that's found. Boom. Miss Michelle. Copy it. Boom. Paste. Got it. Okay. Then all this stuff, other stuff should be auto-populated for you. Now, this is where you'll put your commission. 99% of the time, you're going to put in the percentage. So this one will be 3%. It tells you right here, buyer's agent commission, BAC, 3%. That's what you put there. Now, if they have something 2%, 2.5%. I always put in 3%. And if it becomes an issue, I'll talk to the agent and say, hey, like we worked too hard for this, and really just sell yourself on that. Okay. Never has it ever broken up a deal or anything like that. If it did, or was getting to that, our obligation as a fiduciary is to put your clients first. And so I would accept that lower commission, but it is something where we work really hard, and the 3% from the buyer side, I feel like is very justified. And so I put the 3% there. All right. Now this is where your option money and earnest money and contract receipt will be receipted by the title company. So they will fill this out and send it back your way. Make sure, so that's the end of the contract. That's the end of the 1 to 4. Make sure that you come over here and hit save, because this is not like a Google Doc or anything like that. It will not save your work unless you hit save. So make sure that you hit save, or else you're gonna be doing all that over again. Now, if you go up to the top of the screen, transaction forms, this will take you to the next section. So we're gonna go fill out the third-party financing addendum now. Let's say they're doing a conventional loan. They're putting that $100,000 down. They're doing a conforming loan. So you just need a first mortgage. You don't need to worry about the second mortgage. We are needing $625,000 to be financed. So you'll put the finance number for the conventional loan. You put the finance number right there. We're going to do this over 30 years with an interest not to exceed 3.5. We're going to do 3.5 right now. And it's due for the next 30 years as well. And not to exceed 1% of the loan. Okay. So that's what you'll put in there. Now, if your terms are, maybe you put in a little bit less down. So you put 5% down. So 5% of $75,000 is X. You subtract that from $75,000, $750,000. Excuse me. Let me go back. The purchase price of $725. If you have someone putting 5% down of that, you do 725 times 5%. Then you subtract that 5% from 725, and you would put that number there. Okay, so that's where that number came from. If they're doing a 15-year loan, then it's been 15 and 15. All right, but this is a 30-year loan at 3.5% interest for 30 years, not to exceed 1% of the loan estimate. Okay, then down here, keep in mind they do have other options. You've got a VA loan, FHA loan, a VA, sorry, this is Texas Veterans Loan. Then this is VA loan, USDA, and then a reverse mortgage financing. So keep in mind there are other options for that, but this is the most common one, would be the conventional one. All right, buyer approval. This is very important here. A lot of times with contracts right now, we are shortening these days. I used to put in 21 days right here for everyone, meaning you have 21 days to obtain conditional buyer approval. Essentially, that doesn't mean a whole lot, except that the lender has now seen pay stubs, W-2s, and maybe had the appraisal, but in reality, they might not have had the appraisal, because 21 days would be pretty quick. So this is very important, because this number right here, once you're past this number of days, so say for instance, you went under contract on April 1st, on April 21st, or really 22nd, on April 22nd, after that, if you back out or weren't able to perform based on your financing, then you would lose your earnest money. So you would lose $7,250 for this deal, plus your option fee. And so you don't want to do that, but you do want to make sure that you are comfortable with the number that you're putting in here, while also maintaining your level of comfortability with your client that they can actually do that. Don't just put in 10 days if you don't think that your client is going to be able to have everything in order in that time frame, because we really want to make sure that we let the lenders do their job, look over the paperwork, look over the documents to make sure that they are comfortable doing the loan. If you have an FHA loan, then you're going to need to put in the purchase price right there. But we got myself, my wife, and then the seller down here. Okay, so easy peasy, easy money. Remember, click save. It's not going to auto save for you. Transaction home. This is seller's disclosure on lead-based paint. This is the next one we're going to work on. Okay, you've got a couple options. The seller, the 90% of the time, the seller has no knowledge that there's any lead-based paint there, but anything before that was built prior to 1978 is notified that such property may present exposure to lead. All right, so the seller here, the seller knows that there are some lead-based paint, so they would explain, or the one that's majority of the time checked, seller has no actual knowledge of lead. Okay, and then the second one, same thing, seller has provided the purchaser with all available records, and they would list the records, or seller has no reports or records pertaining to lead-based paint, which majority of the time is what they're going to do. And then you've got a couple options here as a buyer's agent. You can have the buyer waive the opportunity to conduct a risk assessment or inspection of the property for that lead, or within 10 days after the effective date of the contract, you can inspect the property, and then buyer may terminate this contract by giving seller written notice within 14 days after the effective date of the contract, and the earnest money will be refunded to buyer. That is if lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards are present. So you would have to have a lead-based paint, somebody come out there and inspect the property in order to utilize that. I normally do check that just because I don't hardly get any pushback, and it gives my client a little bit of an out if we had to potentially get out of the contract. But the reality of it is your buyer's probably not going to do that, but maybe they will. So it's something to keep in mind. We are required to give them the Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home packet. So buyer has received the pamphlet to protect your family from lead in your home. And then number one is buyer has received copies of all information listed above. So if there is some sort of information above here that the seller is providing you, then you would check this, but they're not. So we're going to leave that blank. Now, as the realtor, you will have to sign this as well. So it'd be the client and the realtor, the client and the listing broker. Okay. Remember, here we go. Save. Boom. And then the last one concerning the right to terminate due to lender's appraisal. Now, this one's pretty common as of late. It's something that has come on the last few months. If you check this first box, that means you don't care what the house appraises for. $725,000 list price. If it appraises for $675,000, you're going to buy the property. That's what you're saying if you check that box. This is very, very common right now, but it is putting a lot of people in a tough spot when the appraisal comes in low. So I don't love it, but that is part of the price of doing business or cost of doing business right now. And so it's not something that I love, but it is something that we are working through right now. And you there are times where you have to do that. So keep that in mind. I don't love it. I don't love recommending it to my clients, but there's a possibility that you're going to have to do that there. But you were saying that you waive the appraisal altogether. It will still happen. You still will have the appraisal because the bank needs that to know how much to lend on. But just know that if that appraiser comes in, for example, in this one, $725 purchase price, $675,000 appraised value, they're doing the loan on $675,000. So you're going to have to do 5% or $100,000. Well, you could manipulate these numbers a little bit, but 5% down for the loan, for the conventional loan of $625, plus the other $50,000 for the spread between $675 and $725. So you're putting a lot of money at risk there. Partial waiver, meaning like you're willing to pay up to a certain point. So $725, let's say we're okay with paying $10,000 over or $15,000 over. So let's just say, as long as the house appraises for $710,000, then we are comfortable purchasing the house. But if it appraises for $709, then we have the ability to get out and get our earnest money back. This is the one I'm I would rather use this partial waiver versus the full waiver. And then the additional right to terminate, in addition to buyer's right to terminate under paragraph 2B of the third party financing addendum, buyer may terminate the contract within blank days of the effective date. The appraised value, if the appraised value according to the appraiser obtained is less than blank and the buyer delivers copy of the appraisal to seller. So ultimately this is one where you'd be like list price or whatnot. Okay. So let's save this again, boom, file save. Now, in order to export all of these, okay, in one place, I'm totally cool if we export all of these contracts. There are some that I don't, because I don't want them all together, but you just click all these right here, go to your basket, click the basket, and you can do one of two things. If you want them all in one PDF, you click that button. If you want them all separate, then you click download as zip. Okay, so generally with all of these, I would do them as one PDF. I feel like it's the nicest, the cleanest way to do things. But if we've got, let's say the seller's disclosure or something like that, I don't want that grouped in with the contract. And so I would do those separate. So but for this instance, let's just go separate. We'll download them as a zip. It's going to pop up down here. And we will open that up. Check all these bad boys, extract all. Let's go browse. I'm going to save it to the desktop. I'm just going to create a test folder. Boom. Test. And then I'm going to put London, which is the name of the street. I'm going to select that folder, extract, and boom, those will pop up right there. And then what we do is we would then go take those contracts, throw them into your e-signature platform, whether you use it through Transaction Desk or you use DocuSign or .loop, whatever it is that you use. And then you send them off to get them signed by your buyer. And then you send those suckers off to the listing agent. But so that's filling out the contracts. I hope that helps. I know that's long, but ultimately I feel like this would be very beneficial. So take this, rewatch it. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. My phone number is 972-754-0361 and email is john@thegingrichgroup.com. All right. Hope it helps.